We acknowledge that Tri-Cities Community Television operates on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coquitlam First Nation. We thank the Coquitlam who continue to live on these lands and care for them along with the waters and all that is above and below.
Warren's work builds on 15 plus years as strategic advisor in public relations, crisis communications, and stakeholder engagement. Warren has led strategic communications for large organizations across BC and Canada. Warren's here to talk about how public land use has changed over the recent years and how these changes impact us all. So let's give a warm welcome to Warren Mirko.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you all for coming and spending your Saturday evening. My discussion is about who is in control of British Columbia's lands. My name is Warren Mirko. I'm the Executive Director of Public Land Use Society, or PLUS. Next slide, please. So PLUS is a non-profit society. Our mission is to ensure decisions made about lands in British Columbia are transparent, lawful, and made in the public interest. We are not a member-driven org. All of our donations come from the public, and we are a non-partisan organization. So maybe to give some comfort to our organizers tonight, I would say non-partisan for us in Canada Revenue Agency terms means we don't advocate for political parties or candidates, but the government and policies and decision makers are fair game for us to criticize. Next slide, please. So Crown land is 95% of British Columbia. And it includes everything that you're aware of outside of your fee simple title or your private property. Parks, mountains, rivers, waterways, all foreshore is Crown land. Even if you have a dock on your private property, that dock is on public land or Crown land. It's crucial to understand that public land is important for a lot of people. Whether you've never thought about your use of it, it's important because people find real meaning in public land, in their engagement with it, in recreation. And it's also where most of our economy derives its value from in British Columbia, is BC's public lands. That's forestry, mining, oil and gas, and other industries. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to do a 2-hour presentation here in 15 minutes. I'll start with saying British Columbia was founded as a Crown colony. The Crown retains underlying title, and this is a great segue from some of the past presentations. In Canada, we have Section 35 constitutional rights for Aboriginal people. Those protect Aboriginal people, or rather, it gives them ownership and control on proven Aboriginal title. Okay, proven title. It imposes a duty to consult, as was discussed earlier, and where appropriate, to accommodate Aboriginal rights and title. It does not establish a veto or a blanket consent requirement over claimed lands. So the concept of inherent Indigenous title blanketing all of British Columbia exceeds the boundaries of Canadian constitutional law. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk a little bit about Aboriginal title, as was discussed earlier. There are 2 key cases I just want to draw everyone's attention to that you might want to research later. In 1997, the Delgamuukw decision ruled Aboriginal title is a right to the land itself, not just a right to hunt and fish, and it encumbers on Crown title. There is the requirement from this decision to consult with First Nations when their rights under Section 35 are affected. And Chief Justice Lamar ended this decision by saying, "We are all here to stay," implying that this is not meant to be a divisive decision for British Columbians. Come 2014, another decision came down called the Chilcotin decision, which confirmed the existence of Aboriginal title in British Columbia for the first time. This is actually anywhere in Canada. And for semi-nomadic groups that move around, it provided guidance on how to prove title in future court cases, and in this case. and established that governments must consult and seek consent from First Nations before developing on proven Aboriginal title lands. The reason I bring this up is to set the framework that there are Aboriginal rights and title well established in Canada. In fact, Canada is the only country in the world that has constitutionalized its Aboriginal rights, for us in Section 35. There is a burden of proof, though, usually needed to establish Aboriginal title and a scrutiny or legal verification process to get there. So what's the problem? Well, in British Columbia, we have a jurisdictional problem. Next slide, please. Oh boy. All of British Columbia is claimed by First Nations and has been for some time. And there's increasingly a dispute over BC's jurisdiction and authority over the province. First Nations dispute each other's claims, I think, as was discussed. There are overlapping claims on this map throughout the province. Some First Nations dispute the historical and ethnographic presence of other First Nations over their territory, and dispute their rights to resources, access, and control of the land. There are numerous lawsuits underway right now in British Columbia of First Nations suing the government over disputes over claimed territory, and of mineral exploration and oil, gas, and other project proponents suing the government for similar reasons. All of it comes down to trying to find out who is in control of the land, what are the systems to establish Aboriginal rights and title over land, and know who is the final authority. Some statements coming out of these legal challenges in the courts purport that the government is failing to balance Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal interests, or that the government is ceding the authority of the province to other external groups. Those are serious charges playing out in the courts right now. Next slide, please. So how do we get to this jurisdictional problem? I would argue that it's the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, or UNDRIP. UNDRIP is a voluntary, non-binding declaration that comes from the United Nations. It was never meant to become law in any jurisdiction, like British Columbia or Canada. I'll note a couple articles for your interest from UNDRIP. Article 26 describes Indigenous territory as whatever is asserted. So back to that map from earlier, all of British Columbia is asserted or claimed territory by one of BC's 200 First Nations. UNDRIP says that what you assert is your territory is yours. It doesn't define that in any further way. Subsection 2 of that article confirms the outright ownership of that land and all the resources on it. And Article 32, subsection 2, requires the free, prior, and informed consent before any impact or decision or development is taken on that land. Well, that applies now to everywhere in British Columbia, not just Aboriginal title lands, which are limited, or treaty lands. Okay, that's the problem with UNDRIP. Next slide, please. In BC, we have DRIPA. It commits the BC government to align all of its laws with UNDRIP. DRIPA itself doesn't transfer land title or do very much, but government acts like it gives them a lot of power to follow the principles of UNDRIP. The Interpretation Act brought in by the government a few years after DRIPA also required that all laws in BC conform with UNDRIP. So when this came about in a appeal court decision relating to mineral claims last year, judges looked at the Interpretation Act and they looked at DRIPA and they went, okay, written within your legislation is the requirement to conform all laws. First Nations are suing the government on this. So we read your laws and say, this makes sense. We will confirm in this appeal decision, you must align all laws with UNDRIP, just as you said you would. And the Premier said, oh boy, this was meant to be aspirational and something that we strive towards and that we commit ourselves to. But we don't want the courts to actually validate that and make this a judiciable issue where First Nations can now take the government to court and say, well, none of your laws align with UNDRIP. They were never designed to align with UNDRIP, nor could they ever align with this United Nations Declaration. How could you seek free, prior, and informed consent from First Nations on everything, on every law moving forward? This wasn't designed that way. So the Premier said, we need to amend DRIPA to take out that judiciable issue. And then last week we found out he's not going to amend DRIPA, he's going to suspend sections of DRIPA which make it a judiciable issue, which make it something that can be brought forward to the courts. And now you see some political ramblings about this. It's likely to be a confidence vote in the next week as political parties fight about what should be done with DRIPA. If we go to the next slide, please. I want to say that confusion about this must be, and all anger must be directed towards the government. Government makes legislation and is responsible for changing, amending, or repealing bad legislation. Any frustration should not be directed towards First Nations. They're navigating the same uncertainty that we are. This is the inevitable outcome of UNDRIP in British Columbia. Indigenous rights are already protected by the Constitution. The issue is solely how government is implementing UNDRIP through secretive land use deals, which support the principles of this United Nations Declaration. And reconciliation, when attached to UNDRIP, is now dividing British Columbians more than ever. It's not bringing people together. And I think First Nations would agree. Reconciliation seems to be set back years because of this and what's happening now. Let's examine. I have maps that were talked about earlier. Here's a map of asserted Musqueam territory. Next slide, please. Last month, the federal government acknowledged Aboriginal title within the Musqueam territory. It didn't say where. It didn't say if it's over private property or not. It didn't tell the province. Ottawa didn't tell the Premier. It didn't tell our Indigenous Relations Minister. And it didn't tell you. It came out in a fishing report, not even really a news release. It didn't go to any media. My organization broke it on Twitter. And within 24 hours, it went into mainstream media and became a hot topic all throughout Canada, because I was in Toronto at the time. Let's go to the next slide. Squamish has overlapping claims in that general area. The government of BC did a deal with the Squamish Nation and gave them control over within their claimed territory. But they didn't consult the public, and they put this out in a news release before Canada Day long weekend. You put news out like that to hide it and not to stimulate discussion. So my team wrote an op-ed, went on TV and radio, and discussed it on a long weekend, crushing our family plans to share this with the public. Next slide, please. The Tsleil-Waututh also claim area in an overlapping section map. Altogether, on the next slide, there's a significant overlap of First Nation claimed territory. But wait, there's more. Let's go to the next slide. Here we are in Coquitlam, and the local First Nations are claiming a smaller stretch here, and it was brought up. They've gone to court to seek title because they were unable to negotiate a treaty because the size of their band was too small for the government to think that they could bring forward representation. Let's go to the next slide. The Tawasin, which actually have a treaty down in what we call Tawasin, have a similar overlapping area of claimed territory all the way up Pitt Lake. And on the next slide, the Stolo claim pretty much the whole area as well. So there's a lot of claims to this story. Again, it's not necessarily that they're seeking private property or to kick anyone out of their home. In fact, most nations have been forthright saying that's not what we're seeking. But when they go for title, like in Cowichan in Richmond, they are seeking Aboriginal title over top of private property. So they've said, we don't wish to kick anyone out, but they're seeking title over top of it. So the outcome and the effect on private property value is sort of detached from what First Nations say that they want to do with the land. But let's go to the next slide and go back to public property. What does this mean? This means the quiet breakup of British Columbia. That's what's at stake here. Unelected gatekeepers are emerging and asserting control over public lands. The province is quietly surrendering or ceding its authority over public lands throughout the province through backroom agreements that are negotiated in secret, released on long weekends, and not shared with the public for input. And BC is fragmenting its own authority and jurisdiction into overlapping claims with no clear decision maker throughout the province. So I'll rip the Band-Aid off and I'll say, BC's sovereignty is at risk when you don't know who's in control of certain parts of the province, or you do know who's in control and you've ceded it to them, an external, unelectable group that is not bound to act in the public interest. You don't have a say in what happens on those lands anymore. If you go to the next slide. What can you do about it? And I'll echo the last presentation and say, staying informed and attending events like this and sharing information with others is the most important thing. I've got an extra slide there. Let me go back to that slide. Stay on there. What must be done? It's the same thing. Stay informed. But in BC, on a policy perspective, we must end backroom deals and have more transparency with the public and with you about land claims, Aboriginal title negotiations in court or with the province, and treaty negotiations, which are public and shared online. We need to advance those modern treaties to define land, rights, and jurisdiction in the province and know who's in control, and establish one clear legal framework in the province. I think treaties are that way, but they need more support in negotiating teams and funding, and no more land use planning agreements done through UNDRIP. Next slide, please. Going back to what you can do, this is a quick picture of all the articles our organization has released in the last year. That's 50 articles in all the mainstream outlets that you're familiar with, in addition to podcasts, radio and television interviews, and more. If you follow our website, you can sign up for our free newsletter. We send out about one a month, and we'll do a roundup of this. You don't have to check the site every week, because we have a lot of media and interest in this topic, and we have people reaching out to us almost every day to speak to community groups like yours. And my final message would be, what you're concerned about is shared by groups all throughout the province, whether it's industry or recreational groups. Everyone is concerned. Nobody knows that their interests and worries are shared by others. And since my group has gone out and started talking to groups, we see that it's a massive issue. And it's the government's fault, not First Nations. Because government is choosing, as we found out tonight, not to attend or allow discussion or show up and engage in this sensitive topic. So my ask for everyone is just stay informed and share information. You can go to the last slide just to show my website, publiclanduse.ca. I'm happy to answer questions later. Thank you.